Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Rosado, a passionate software engineer, and today, even if I'm a little sick, I'm really excited to start this new episode of Craftcode podcast, a podcast about tech trends and demystification of IT principles. And today we talk about on how we can empower your team with XP practices. By XP, we mean extreme programming. So we'll see why we should embrace XP practices, and why mentoring is our duty in software industry, how we can onboard team members in XP practices thanks to learning hours, and why learning hours can help to introduce sociable programming, and how avoid exhaustion of the mentor. For this today, we are with Steven Diamante. Hi, Steven.
Hey, how's it going, Nicholas?
Maybe you can start by the beginning. Just could you tell us who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Steven Diamante. I'm a software craftsman. I'm a technical coach. Been in the industry for about 7 years now, and I started on Extreme Programming Team. And ever since that amazing team, I've kind of been trying to chase that feeling ever since and trying to get in a situation like that. So these days, I find myself on teams that are not so experienced with extreme programming practices and principles and such. And so I've found ways to teach, and the more I teach, the more I learn. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just having a lot of fun with that and just trying to bring the fun back to programming because we all started out coding because I think we enjoyed it and we loved creating something. And I just want to bring that fun back to teams.
Yeah, the best way to learn is to teach something. So you are a technical coach, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some technical coaching for the past few years, yes.
Okay. So maybe you really know all XP practices, but just could you tell us why we should embrace those XP practices?
Yeah, so some people may take the standpoint that, it's our duty as software craftsmen to, to
Yeah.
create high quality code. But recently I've been trying to shift that perspective and focus back on the business because
The
at
business
the end of the
value.
day, us as software engineers, we are service providers for the business. We provide them the service of creating the software to do their day-to-day business and ultimately make money.
Yeah.
So the real value in XP practices is how we can deliver more frequently, get feedback, and at the end of the day, like delight our customers and make money for the business because um, we want to be delivering business value, and the best way that I've seen that be done is through Agile and focusing in on Agile. I think the best implementation of Agile that I've come across is extreme programming. And I think it
Yeah.
really gets down to the core of Agile, which is working with your customers and getting that feedback.
Yeah. And additionally, it's the best way to work as a team, because I guess that in other organization that don't practice XP practices, people work in the same team but in isolation. Yeah, and thanks to those practices, um, the business make money, but additionally we have a team spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, so after my first extreme programming team, I wanted to get more experience with Scrum. And I wanted to see like how am I as an engineer not pair programming every day? Like it was kind of a test to myself. Like am I just a can I do this on my own? It's kind of, as a trying to get out of the junior phase of being a developer. And what happened was I got on a Scrum team that were all in silos. And stand up, we would all kind of say what we did, come together, but then never really be in touch the rest of the day. And I didn't feel like I was a part of a team. It was so odd.
Yes.
It seemed like we were just people just trying to get some stuff done. It didn't seem like we were on a team trying to achieve a
Yes.
goal. And I think that's really what like pairing and mob programming and just really like helping each other. Instead of saying I have this user story and it's my responsibility, I always try to say that it's the team's responsibility to deliver, the highest value item of the iteration that we want to do. Because at the end of the day, we want to deliver business value.
But it's not so easy to have this kind of team spirit or kind of working together because I think we need to have some prerequisites like psychological safety. If you have management in command and control, it's it can be really difficult to try to work together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. And so a few years ago, I started following some technical agile coaches and starting to see the way they actually do that. They would get into these companies that were pretty against that way, but there was some leadership that wanted them to solve some, delivery problems and things like that. And from that, I learned about Saman coaching and Emily Bache and Llewellyn Falco are some names that kind of like started that whole thing. And then I got introduced to mob programming. I started learning how to do that and started facilitating that with my teams and introducing that. And I really saw a huge benefit from those. And one of the biggest benefits that we'll dig into more today is learning hours
Yeah.
and that's just been amazing.
But we will see this because what you describe, it's that you introduce some XP practices as a mentor. But before just deep dive into learning hours, I will share my screen to see why mentoring is our duty in software industry. So I will share my screen. Yeah, screen one. Okay. So this is the manifesto for software craftsmanship. It's just a little reminder of the manifesto, and we will see which part concerns the mentoring. So, as aspiring software craftsmen, we are raising the bar of professional software development by practicing it and helping others learn the craft. Through this work, we have come to value not only working software but also well-crafted software. Not only responding to change but also steadily adding value. It's making money for the business. Not only individuals interaction but also a community of professionals. And in this part, it's our duty to share with the community, like you have did with learning hours by introducing some XP practices in your team. And it's our duty to mentor and not keep the knowledge just for us. And the last one is not only customer collaboration, but also productive partnership. So it's really interesting because in this manifesto, it's many developers signed the manifesto, and I think we need to highlight why we need to level up the community by sharing and mentoring each guy. So I will stop this, and I think now we can deep dive into learning hours by just answer the question on how we can onboard the team in XP practices thanks to learning hours. So just could you share with us your experience?
Yeah, so yeah, one of the teams that I guess the team that I kind of introduced to this to, I mean, this is not my idea, by the way. I'm using resources from Salmon Coaching Society, and
Yeah.
anybody can do this. And I hope by sharing this, like your viewers will be inspired to also do the same thing that I'm doing. And it is really a great way
It's
to
totally free.
mentor
Yeah.
people. Yeah, yeah. The resources out there. You just got to go set it up, and it's not much work. But I'll share my story. So I was brought on to a team that was consultants in the same consultancy that I was in, but they were not too familiar with test-driven development. They were pretty beginner level at that. And the pair programming, one of the technical leads on the team saw that it wasn't going so well, and they were also pretty inexperienced with pair programming. And our consultancy is um, and uses XP practices and likes to do pairing, uh, where it makes sense. And so when I got on the team, I was like, okay, so you want me to kind of train them up? Am I like free to kind of do anything here? Because I've got a good idea, but it's gonna be about 1 to 2 hours a week that we need to set aside of doing dedicated learning,
Yeah.
because this isn't going to be one workshop and it's done, because that's not the way you learn these things.
You
You
need a
learn these things
continuous
by
slot. Yeah.
continuous practice,
Yeah.
yeah, and deliberate practice, and that's what learning hours is all about. So I started introducing these sessions, and yeah, the team initially, uh, if I were to say, like, they didn't refactor much. Like, if I saw any PRs, there wasn't much like cleaning up and kind of making things easier to change, and kind of that evolutionary design
Yeah.
aspect of TDD that is really beneficial. But after a year of doing learning hours, um, I mean, even after 6 months, I saw a huge improvement. I would say even after 3 months, I started seeing them refactor the PRs. They're starting to kind of embrace the TDD workflow. And I was also pairing on the team as a developer. I wasn't I was kind of a player coach role. So I was also pairing with them, and I started to see in meetings that they would speak up more. There was a lot more collaboration, because a huge part of Learning Hour is that we use ensembling, or also called mobbing. We use ensembling as a learning tool.
Okay.
So instead of me pairing, this is the way I used to do it. Pair with I would pair with Nicholas, for example,
Yeah.
and then I would pair with somebody else the next week, and then 5 weeks later I might pair with Nicholas again. But if I'm like if I'm the only one on the team that knows XP practices, that means only once a month I'm having an impact on people.
Yes.
But
You
if
need to
I can
share.
get together with the whole team, if I can get together with the whole team and all of them learn something, and they also learn from each other, that's the true power of learning hours.
So learning hours can be. It's always with the entire team or not?
Yeah, all the developers. Um, I usually invite anybody. I
Yeah.
mean, when we do not, we've I've done some non-technical, um, like kind of like process katas, and I've invited like product owners as well. But the regular learning hours is more technical, so I would just invite developers or
So
tech leads
you
or
invite
anybody with technical
the
knowledge.
whole team, but if you are not available, for example, you can skip the learning hours.
Yeah, so I always made it optional.
Yeah.
because I don't want to force anybody to come. And but everybody loved it. They loved coming.
Yeah,
Like it
but
was their favorite meeting of the week.
oh, okay. But it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But how we can foster, because I think learning hours can be a tool to foster psychological safety. In a previous podcast, we see that the stage 4 of psychological safety is to challenge the status quo and contribute and participate. But how we can introduce some prerequisites? Maybe we have some developer a little shy, and how we can lead to ask question and contribute. It's just the frequency of the learning hours that foster this kind of initiative.
Yeah, so let me talk about the first session that I normally
Yeah.
do with it.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, well, I would say before even the first session, I like to use a lean coffee. And if your viewers aren't familiar with that, lean coffee is proposing different topics. So for this, I would say, what do you want to learn? Like what topics do you want to learn as a team? Because I don't want to come into a team and just say you need to learn this, this, and this. I don't have a set curriculum. I am going to build a curriculum based on the team needs.
Okay.
So this lean coffee really brings that out, and so they'll introduce some topics and then we'll vote on it. And the most votes, that's the one we'll talk about first. And then that kind of sets a schedule. And we'll kind of talk about, like, why do you want to learn this? Like, what problems are you having? Like, by learning this, what problems do you think you're going to solve? Like things like that. And then other teams, they may not have like any knowledge at all of what they want to learn. So I kind of just based on their situation will kind of figure something out. But then we go to the first session. Um, I should say that on my team, we would do this weekly. Um,
Okay.
uh, either one session for 2 hours or maybe two times a week, 1 hour each. But I
Okay.
like to do 2 hours a week. And I find that that's good. Other technical coaches that are actually coming into companies will do it daily. They'll do daily 1 hour every day, because
one
they're
hour
only
every
working
day.
with the teams for maybe less than a month. Um, and they may take a break and come back. But yeah, so I do it once a week. So I'll let me talk about the first session. So um, yeah, so ensembling is a very important part, and we use it a lot. Sometimes we do pairing based on the learning hour, but a lot of the time I found that ensembling is more effective because everybody's working together. Then I, as a facilitator, can kind of guide people here and there and also see like what troubles they're having. And the great thing is like when people make mistakes, everybody learns from it.
Yeah. It's the sharing the collective knowledge with all the participants. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first session is all about how do we ensemble? Like what does this look like? How do we work together? And so I've only ever spent a session with that, but if you feel your team needs more than that, it's kind of based on the team needs, right? So one thing to introduce psychological safety that I lead with every time is that we is a working agreement basically. Like it's a small working agreement, and it's one that I introduced to the team. It's not something that we come up together, but it's kind of, yeah, it's we treat everyone with kindness, consideration, and respect.
Yes.
Um, and then a huge and then also to that, yeah, and so I kind of like go through those definitions as well. Like even though those are terms we're familiar with, I talk about it a little bit more, and that like this is a safe space. I lead with that. I'm like, I'm gonna make mistakes, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's part of learning. So I'm, I try to lead with that and really create that psychological safety up front. And then another thing that I always go with, which is an important part of ensembling, is that the yes and rule is that if I am the navigator and I'm navigating the typist, which are some roles in ensembling, um, and we're going one way, right? And then
Yes.
the next navigator comes in and he wants to go the other way.
This
Like
is the difficult part to have the two way.
that's
Sorry.
that's an anti-pattern there. So the yes and rule comes from improv. And it's, okay, I see where you are. Let's yes, and instead of like, no, but let's do this, like in taking the idea of the previous person and kind of running with it. And of course, if we all think that we're going in the wrong direction, we should probably change directions. But it's kind of to stop those like subjective developer opinions about certain parts of the design and such.
But
But
some
I always
developer
lead with that one too. I think it's an important rule to state.
some developer maybe or have less confident to try to pair with old guys. So how you react on this? Maybe you will tell us we'll try the next time, for example, or something like that.
Um, what do you mean you'll try next time? What do you mean?
If developers come in learning hours, but have less confident to try to
Okay.
pair. Uh, just I think in the first session, just watch the session. So how you foster initiative
Mm.
and take the control of the keyboard, for example? Or,
Yeah. I've had people a little bit shy and
yeah.
a little bit scared. I've never had anybody not participate. And the way that I'm like, if you show up, you are doing stuff. Like this is active. This is active learning. Like, I mean, if you're a product owner and you just want to see what we're doing, sure. But I might even want to get you in there. Like, hey, just type what we're saying. Like you can learn how to program. So how would I approach that? I would I don't want to put too much pressure on them. I think probably after the first session, I think a one-to-one conversation is more effective than calling out in front of the whole group. And just kind of like ask them like, how'd that go? And I mean, that's actually in the learning hour structure anyways. We always end with a retrospective. Like we always talk about like, how did that feel? Like that's one of the questions I always ask is like tell me emotions. Like we're like let's actually talk about like how did that go? Like how did it feel to work that way? Is that new? Is that different? Is it kind of weird? Like sometimes it's awkward. Like it's really awkward the first couple sessions. Like any mob that I've ever like when I started learning mobbing, it was always awkward. Sometimes when you get a new group, it doesn't flow too well the first maybe 20 or 30 minutes, and then you just start getting in a rhythm, and you're like, so I always see that happens.
So
Um, yeah,
so
but most of the people are that I've worked with are already kind of pairing daily. So that's been one kind of benefit that I've had is that I haven't had to gone from like totally siloed developers to mobbing. But I mean, I don't know if I want to show this video, but I'll explain this video. There's a festival and there's one guy dancing. Okay, so
okay,
he's just dancing, just just dancing all by himself, right? And then another guy comes in and they start dancing, and then
okay,
like they're dancing for like 5 minutes, and then like three more people come in, and then
okay,
eventually like 60 people are dancing together,
okay. And the
and
map
so.
programming is like this. Okay,
And so actually being in an ensemble is actually easier than pairing. Because when you're pairing, you're one on one with one person. But when you're ensembling, there's so many different minds in there that you don't have to hold it all up on your own. That's the true collaboration that's happening.
Yes, but
So
how
it's actually easier.
how you convince the management? Because you start by introducing the first session with an icebreaker. It's for technical guys extra, but because we have some slot in the week for learning hours, what is your advice to introduce this in the management side?
Yeah, well, I haven't actually had too much friction with it, but what I sell it as is, hey, this is 2 hours a week. That's 5% of our week.
Okay.
And it's an investment. It's an investment in our skills as a team. And this investment, it will pay off. And the morale of the team is boosted. Um, yeah, and if they want to talk to other people that I've ran this with before, I can send them their way and get some, testimonials. Um, but I feel that saying like 5% of our week, it sounds so much better than 2 hours a week, I guess. It
But
seems
but
so small. It's like it's only 5%.
should we ask to the management before start this practice or not?
Yeah, I think so because it's going to be on their calendar and it's going to be taking away from their development time because in the learning hours, we only work on like coding katas and small exercises. And those katas will translate into the day-to-day work, but we don't actually use, very rarely will I bring production code into a learning hour. I have done it from time to time, and that's very effective as well. But yeah, I mean, they're being taken away from their day-to-day work, so you do kind of have to sell it, right, to management. So I do think that's an important part. I don't think you should like, go behind their back and do, they're gonna, So yeah, I think just selling the idea that this is an investment and that
And highlight the
these
benefits. Yeah.
skills, yeah, and like these this will help us deliver faster. This will help us upskill the whole team. When new developers come in, like onboarding, that you're, you know, like I don't think Learning Hours is primarily an onboarding tool, but to bring developers in and say like, hey, this is how we code. Like we do test-driven development. We refactor. We tidy up things before adding a new feature, things like that.
But it's an interesting thing. You told that in learning hours you make some kata, but uh, how many months you need to shift some techniques that you learn in the learning hours to the real project? What is
Yeah,
your experience?
I mean, I've seen it go from days to maybe months, depending on how tough the topic is. But that's why I like to start really small. And all of these learning hours are really small. Like, I'm not going to come in here and say, hey, for an hour, let's learn TDD. No, TDD has so many micro skills in it, and learning hours is about learning micro skills. So one of the sessions that like okay, so first session, let's learn how to ensemble. Second session, let's take a really small piece to start getting value out of it because that second session is very important because you just told management that you're taking away their developers time. So how can we find some small thing to really get a big benefit? So one thing I've done is finding some messy code that we have, some God class that everybody's been adding to, and let's just talk about everything that we don't like about it. It's an activity that JB Rainsberger came up with called What's Not to Like About This Code.
Okay.
And so that was our second session on one of my teams. And then we started actually outside of learning hours, we just started ensembling. Everybody just wanted to work together on doing all those things we talked about. So then we started actually ensembling, and people got more familiar with it. And yeah, so I think just taking those like little pieces, like renaming. Renaming is a refactoring, but refactoring is such a big topic. But if you just talk about renaming, and there's a learning hour on naming as a process, like how can we get some dishonest names that are in our code? Like there's this method called handle. What does handle do? Right? Like let's actually rename it to what it actually does and make some honest method names so we can understand this legacy code that we have to work with.
Yes, but my point is to highlight to our podcast listener that it's not just for fun, and we will see the benefits on your project in the long term. So maybe short term, you talk about 3 months. So I just plug my charger. Just one thing. Sorry. So yes, my point is just to highlight that it's not just for fun, and if you start to invest time in learning hours, the whole team will practice new techniques on the target project. Yeah.
Yeah, so one analogy that Llewellyn Falco talks about is that learning hours is like buying bonds. Like it's an investment over the long term. But like if you want to get more value, take those learning hours and start actually ensembling on your real work.
Yeah.
Start like have somebody on your team that knows these XP practices and take now you know ensembling. Now use that on your real work. Now that's like swing trading. Like now we're investing in some things that really move, right?
Yes.
So
It
yeah,
it was the third part of the podcast. It's how why learning hours can be a game changer in sociable programming, because when we have a meeting each week or several time in weeks, after we can shift the practice in the real project, and people work as a team at the end.
yeah, yeah. So we'll get some coding feature, and I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna open up a Teams room, and anybody that wants to come in, let's just ensemble on it together. And again, not forced. It's just an invitation, right? And so like three or four people will come and we'll all work together and like we deliver faster because of it. We produce less bugs. There's so much value of it. And I mean, how do you measure productivity? You had a episode on productivity. Like, I think there's a correlation between happy teams and productive teams. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
if you are like miserable and you get you have to do some code change and it takes you weeks and weeks because it's a big ball of mud, like you're just miserable because of that and you're not productive. But if you have such an elegant code base that's fun to work with and enjoyable, yeah, you're productive. You deliver all the time. So that's one correlation that I've seen.
And what is your advice if you have in the team before the first session or maybe at the beginning, if you have some reluctant developer that tell I don't have time, or worse, I like to work alone, for example, what is your advice to invite those developers to try the learning hours?
Well, we're not working. We're learning. We're all learning together. And if you're a developer, I hope you like learning because if you don't, you're not going to be in this industry long, right? So, you know, we're just learning together and working in this way is the best way that I know how to learn as a group. So that's what I'd say to them. Um, and I was on a team where I gave an open invite for everybody to come, and there were two more senior engineers, and they felt like they already knew all this stuff, and they didn't come. They would rarely come to learning hours. And I started to see all the other people with less years of experience start to like start to like be more experienced than them. I start to see like them doing really great things while these seniors were just stagnating because they didn't invest in their personal growth.
Yes, but I think it's the common issue because I think it's we talk about egoless programming. You know that some developers maybe because it's not humble or maybe have some
Yeah.
fear to discover new thing and say, oh, you don't know this new techniques or so. How we can involve those developers, even if it's at the beginning reluctant, you know.
Yeah. Um, so
Just highlight the
I
benefits. Yeah.
yeah, I really can't force you to do something you don't want to do.
My point
Um,
is maybe you can share some tips. Maybe at the end of the session. Oh, today we have learned this in the session. It's this kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
tips.
So yeah, so I always do that. Like so on we'll have a channel. Like I mean,
Okay.
because I will, if it's a meeting, sometimes you'll have like a meeting channel that you can kind of put notes on. So I definitely have some way that you can have some meeting notes. You're like, today we learned this, we did this. Sometimes I'll even put like quotes, um, like Paul said he had an amazing time, and this is so much better than the boring training that he did last year, right? Things like that. So I think them starting to hear about that, I think it's just human nature. You're like, oh, I'm missing out on something, right? So the more you can get everybody talking about it, like I bring it up in like every team retro, or somebody else brings it up.
Okay.
Like if I don't bring it up, somebody's like, "Oh, we learned this in learning hours." Like imagine being on a team and every at the end of every iteration, they're talking about learning hours and you don't go to it. Like what are you missing out on?
Yes, but it's why I want to highlight this to our podcast listener is to link this to the manifesto and our duty to mentor and involve or create new crafters and those these practices like learning hours should not dig or increase the deep inside between two developers. Yeah, it's my point.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. So those senior developers that weren't coming to learning hours, it would have been great to have them there because they could have spread the knowledge that they already know.
Mm.
And the, I mean, the people that were there as learners, they also teach me things. Like we all learn
Yeah.
from each other. So yeah, I think even if you're like a rock star developer, like come to learning hours and share all your knowledge. Like don't just keep it all to yourself. Like, be a force multiplier and share that knowledge that will grow the team's knowledge.
I, I think it's the last part of the podcast is how we can avoid exhaustion of the mentor. I think a bad idea about mentoring is that it's only the mentee that benefits the session, and the mentor can have also some benefits like increase his communication skills or his sharing knowledge skills also. And what is your advice to swap or switch the mentor and the mentee, in the to avoid exhaustion if in each meeting of learning hours it's the same guys that organize, or it's a common issue that I have seen during my career. So what is your advice to keep dynamic the session and
Yeah. So if you were to set up learning hours in your organization, you know, uh, in your team, always keep an open invite that yes, I'm leading this time, and I have, you know, but like this is open to anybody. And I've had other people, like one of those senior engineers that hardly ever came to learning hours. He gave a great session on Cucumber, and then we started, learning Cucumber together, and BDD kind of techniques as well. And so my advice would be to definitely keep an always just say every learning hour, hey, I don't have anything for next week. Does anybody want to present anything?
okay.
Like, you could put it like that. Like, even if you have something, you could just say like, I'm not sure what we're gonna do. Like, if y'all want to keep this going, and try to see like who steps up. Um,
And,
yeah.
and what
Uh,
happen?
I, I,
What happen if you have you don't have a subject for the next session, for example?
we just cancel it.
Okay, cancel. But the
Um,
risk is to cancel again and again. So
yeah.
it's my point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that is risky. So, yeah, I mean that so when I've done it, I've been like the main person to do it. It's not that exhausting and I really enjoy it. Like,
Okay.
and I think I should really share well, I mean, let's share the link of the resources, but I'd like to talk about the structure of a learning hour and then kind of tell a little bit about how I set it up. And it usually takes me maybe less than an hour to kind of set up a board. So I work remotely, so I've never done this in person, and so I'm just going to talk about how I do it remotely. So I use Miro, so
Yeah.
I'll set up a frame in Miro, and the learning hour has 5 different parts. We have the learning objectives. What should you be coming away today knowing how to do? Um, and then and so I state those out loud, and I'm like, this is our focus for today. And then we go into the connect activity. So connect activity is a way to get the participants in a mode of learning. And sometimes it's just a question. Sometimes it's like an activity, like, okay, we're talking about some things about refactoring today. Let's have some true false about some misconceptions or some things about refactoring. And let's kind of talk about it. And that sparks some conversation and it kind of focuses us in on what we're about to learn. And it also connects previous knowledge with new knowledge. And like the way our brain works, like that's how we learn. Like we need to connect what people already know with what they're about to learn. So those connect activities focus in on that. After connect, we have the concept. That's when the facilitator uh, would like for me, I would talk about what are we going to learn today? What is this little micro skill or little skill within a skill that we're going to dive in today? It could be something as simple as, hey, let's practice writing unit tests, but not just unit tests. Let's talk about naming conventions, test naming conventions. Like, what are some possibilities? And we can talk about that. And I'll say, this is some possibilities. Which one do you like?
But
Um,
but
which one do
it's
you not like?
this kind of simple subject. It's only for the beginning or at
It
the
depends where
it depends.
the team is. And it's kind of as a coach, noticing what is the team struggling with.
Okay.
That's the thing that I want to bring to the learning hour. So I'm seeing a lot of inconsistent test names. So I've ran a session on that. And then that became like a team norm that we write test names generally like this. And this is our accepted kind of team norm.
It gives a
Um,
chance to the team to ask some question about an issue that struggle with it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and always constant feedback. Like, yeah, I'll get to that though. Okay, so in the concept, it's not like a PowerPoint presentation. Like, I usually just throw some notes on Miro, and I'm like, hey, this is what this thing is, and it's very simple because I don't want it to be more than like 10 minutes. I don't want me to be talking for too long because the next section is concrete, and that's when we take that concept and now we put it into practice. And this is where we actually learn. We're actually doing the thing. So we talked about naming conventions. Now let's actually see it in action.
Directly,
Or
without preparation, directly we switch to.
well, yeah, there has to be some preparation. So so I'll have a repo, like some Kata's repo, and then we'll kind of all dive in there as a team, and then we'll start ensembling. Okay, you're the navigator. In 5 minutes, we're rotating. And
Okay.
now the next person will be navigator. And we're all going to go through this activity. And yeah, something as simple as test naming, that's actually a great way to learn ensembling because that's easy. We're just naming things. But you're learning one little small thing at a time. And that's a very important part. You don't want to overload the team too much and make them learn 10 different things at once. So, all right, we're just naming tests, but we're actually getting better at ensembling. We're getting better with the rotations. We're getting better with communicating with each other,
Yeah.
right?
So I
Because as a navigator, you have to tell the typist what is your intent, right? And so you get practice with that as well.
so I think.
And so that is the biggest section of learning hours. You do that for about 25 to 30 minutes usually. And then the last 10 minutes, once we're at the last 10 minutes of the hour, or if you decide to do 2 hours, the last 10 minutes is conclusion. So this is
Conclusion.
four C's, okay? So we have connect and sorry, connect, concept, concrete, and then conclusion. Conclusion is just a retro. So in conclusion, I'll ask, what just happened? Like, what did we do? How did it feel? How is this going to change the way you work?
Mm.
Or we might say just one simple question, like say it was like an intro to TDD session. Um, if you could describe to somebody, like, how would you describe test-driven development in your own words? Just write it on a post-it, and and that's a way that you can internalize the learning and make it stick.
And is it a good thing to share the conclusion with other team member that not participate at the beginning, for example? Or.
Yeah, I mean, conclusions for everybody. And I wouldn't want anybody to like hide anything because I want it to be a safe space.
Yeah.
Um, I want everybody to like share with each other and be vulnerable and being like, and also I always say like, what did you learn? Like that's another question. Like what did you learn? It's a learning hour. I hope you learned something. And so, some people are like, I never knew this. Like, I feel like I've been missing such a huge part of my growth as a developer. And, I'm so happy that we learned this. So,
And for the, do you have the ownership of the next session, or it's my row, and in my row, all people can propose a new subject, for example, because I think we need to animate the next session.
yeah, yeah. So sometimes, yeah, some of the questions I'll have in there will be like, what are some questions that you still have, right? Like we learned this thing, but like, what is missing? Um, what is missing? And sometimes that drives the next session. I try not to plan too far ahead because if I plan too far ahead, then I'm not able to kind of pivot and be agile. And so, yeah, I hear people will say like, I really want to learn about this thing, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well, yeah, we'll have a learning hour on that. Maybe not next week, but it's coming up. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Maybe the podcast duration is it reach 1 hour.
Yeah.
So maybe if you have a conclusion about learning hours, and if you have some tips or advice to team that want to introduce this kind of practice, what is your advice?
Yeah, I mean, I shared my story on how that I brought learning hours to my team, but how you bring it to your team may look completely different because every team has a different context. They're coming at it from a different experience, and it just may be completely different. So it's really about meeting people where they are and just having that awareness and starting small. If I could leave one piece of advice, I would say to frame it as an experiment. Say that let's try this thing I learned about, share some resources with people, start to inspire the culture of learning, and just treat it as an experiment. Hey, let's try this thing once a week for an hour for about a month, and then let's retro about it and see how it went. And if we don't like it, we can just stop. This kind of cheap experiments are like so easy to sell, and most of the time, if it's something like I really believe in learning hours, and I know it's gonna work. So once that month is comes up, I feel like everybody's gonna be like, yeah, let's keep doing this. This is great.
Yes, but for keep doing this kind of practice, I think the animation of the learning hours is a key role for in long term keep uh, once per week the organization of the meeting. So I think it's we need to have a guide that have the ownership. I think to keep continuously the practice, and maybe after other developers will take the ownership, but we need to identify one guy that organize the meeting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it usually is somebody that steps up to be in that player coach role, and to actually make sure that it's happening, and to set up the sessions because there is some preparation that needs to be done. If you're working remotely, you need to set up the boards. You need to think about what you're gonna do. Um, you know, I think, Nicholas, if you would share the Salmon coaching resources, there are all different kinds of topics there with test-driven development, refactoring, working with legacy code. There's even a learning hour on learning to ensemble. So that in itself is learning hour. And so, yeah, just being able to go through those, and I think it, really makes an impact.
Yeah, it takes time to change the culture of the team at the end. So you need to
Yeah,
continuously share and highlight the benefits of those practices, and at
yeah,
the end, we will have a happy team. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That's the goal. Any team I come into, I'm like, how can we have more fun?
yeah,
And the teams that have fun, they start delivering, and the business sees it, and they're like, what's happening here? This is great. I'm like, yeah, learning hours. That's what did it.
yeah. And at the end, we'll make more money because we will deliver more business value by
Yeah,
introducing all the techniques that you learn in learning hours, and we'll try to introduce it in the real project. So thanks, Steven. It was a really interesting topics, and like you know, I am in a continuous improvement approach. So don't hesitate to leave your feedback, and if you have some question, don't hesitate to ask your question in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer with Steven. So thank you so much, and for our
yeah.
podcast listener, see you soon in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.